In the next 24 hours, I'll be reading Brian Preston's Millionaire Mission, which came out today. Brian Preston is a CFP CPA, founder of The Money Guy Show, and co-founder of Abound Wealth Management, which is a registered investment advisory managing over $1 billion in assets under management. Basically, this guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to money. I've been following Brian and his show now for years, and as a CFP professional and a member of Gen Z, I'm mostly curious to see how Brian walks the line of providing both relevant and yet evergreen financial education. And with all that said, let's jump in. Okay, it is 6 o'clock on May 28th. I just got this package in the mail. I was literally tracking it as it was like 3 stops away, watching the guy in the window like a child. This is what I get excited about as an adult. If you're watching this and you're younger than 26, this is what you have to look forward to. And there we go. Sorry, box. Okay, dang. This is very nice. Nice cover here. I know I just said nice cover, but I hate reading books while holding the cover, so I'm just going to rip that bad boy right off here. Put that to the side. Unlike some maniacs, I don't throw that away. I actually just set it to the side. I finished reading the book, which this is beautiful. That'd look great on a shelf even without the cover. But I finished reading the book, and then I put the cover back on before I put it on my bookshelf. So I'm not crazy. I don't just toss that to the side. But yeah, very nice. Looks like it's not too big, which is good. Especially a book like this, when you can give it as a gift to people that aren't that into finance. You don't want to hand them like a thick volumed thing. You want to give them something that's pretty thin that they could read comfortably, you know, over a week or so, or in my case, 24 hours. Just looking through this here. Looking at the table of content here, it looks like this is going to follow the financial order of operations, which is Brian Preston's 9-step order of operations for what to do with your money. It's kind of like Dave Ramsey's baby steps, but a little bit more updated and advanced in my opinion. There's a step for respecting the FU, graduating from the basics, which is kind of in between steps 5 and 6. And there's 2 other chapters at the end of the book. Didn't think I'd get emotional right off the bat when it comes to a financial planning book, but his dedication in the front is so sweet. If you've been following Brian Preston, especially if you know about his story and everything, you might just have to draw a tear. Jeez, can't wait to get into this. I'll let you guys know what I think. I'm taking a break real quick because I just finished the introduction and the first chapter. My first impressions are good. It seems like he's doing a really good job of blending the technical financial education with the more high-level financial worldview that should be applied whenever reading this kind of book. He definitely does a good job of not just throwing new people in on the deep end. He took the time to take a step back and kind of explain all of the terms. If you're somebody that watches The Money Guy Show like I do on a pretty frequent basis, then you're familiar with all these kinds of terms or The Money Guy Show specific lingo. He doesn't use that lingo without first explaining what that lingo is. So I think that he does a good balance of both catering to an audience that he already has, that already knows that lingo and is familiar with some of these stories, but also presenting them as though they're new for people that aren't familiar with his show. It is a tough balance to strike, so I think that some folks that are really new to The Money Guy Show, they might have to go back to the index at the beginning a little bit to understand some of the terms because they are used very frequently in the first introduction and chapter. As somebody who watches The Money Guy Show frequently, there hasn't been anything that's been brand new. I am looking forward to new stories and new context to things that I've heard about in the past but want to learn more about, but it is all very solid financial advice. About to hop into the financial order of operations, which will actually get into his 9-step program, and I'm excited to see how he lays these out. Let's keep going. Okay, first things first, Brian's really good at persuading the reader without being condescending, especially to people that have or are currently in tough financial situations. And he really hits on the rhetorical triangle of logical, emotional, and authoritative arguments in his book, while still being engaging with the material. If you look at the time lapses carefully, you'll probably notice me smile or giggle to myself a few times. He does a really great job of introducing jokes and some self-awareness puns and things into the chapters that are, I think, really phenomenal. Also, at the beginning of each of the different steps in the financial order of operations, he includes a quote, and so far they've almost always made me laugh. I won't ruin it for you, but one of them is from Game of Thrones, and the other one's from Queen Latifah, which is just phenomenal to include in a non-fiction book about personal finances. In these past 3 chapters, I'm also starting to see more stories and statistics that I don't remember from other content from The Money Guy Show. I don't know if this is just because I've missed those things, but I do think it's because he's introducing more things here than what you just get looking at it online, which for me, as someone who's been following The Money Guy Show for years now, was really a big value add. The debt chapter is a bit of a doozy, but rightfully so so in my opinion, because this is a topic that affects so many Americans so deeply. Also, the way that he presents his arguments on debt, although they're different than Dave Ramsey, I think complements them very well. And I don't think that Brian Preston's trying to argue with Dave Ramsey. I think that this is meant to be just a different perspective that's offered to a different group of people, and it's going to be very beneficial for those kinds of people. Going into the next chapters, I'm excited to see how he engages with some of the more complex topics that comes from working with higher net worth clients. Until then, let's get back to it. All right, I just finished chapters 5 through 8, and it continues to be a great read. Everything continues to be very technically precise, but that's what I would expect given his credentials and experience in the industry. Also, the editing process that this has gone through has clearly been very thorough. I will say in these chapters, the planning gets a lot deeper, and there are some illustrations and things that are going to date this book for future readers, but I do think this is inevitable, and you do see this with other books that are like this. So things like The Wealthy Barber, The Millionaire Next Door, or even Dave Ramsey's Baby Steps, they all start to date themselves pretty quickly a few years after publication, just because of the changing laws and environment around personal finances. But on the flip side, this makes it a much better practical book, so it is much more holistic in that way, and this one book and the resources provided on the website I think would be enough to help somebody get right with their finances without having to do a lot of extraneous research. I've still got a few chapters to go, so I don't want to start making some broader conclusions just yet. I'm going to hop back into it, and then I'll wrap this all up at the end. Done. I just wrapped up the book, and I will say that the last few chapters were a lot less technical than the previous chapters, and I think that makes sense. As your net worth gets higher and higher, the complexities of your personal finances get to a point where it just wouldn't be possible to cover all of them in a book like this. So instead of being technical in these last few chapters, Brian really focuses on the meaning of money and how to have a meaningful relationship with money once you've got to a place where your needs are met and you've instilled the habits that are necessary for those needs to continue to be met for the rest of your life. In the last 3 to 4 chapters, Brian really takes on the role of a financially competent dad who's instilling life lessons and money lessons to a child. That's how I felt, at least, being that kind of generation. You can tell that he equally cares about your happiness and fulfillment in life as he does your financial success. I think that's part of what makes this book so good to read. This is not a cash grab book at all. I did not get that impression from him in the slightest. He clearly makes the distinction here that money is just a tool that can help you to afford the time or freedom that it takes for you to live a life that is fulfilling and meaningful to you personally. He also shares about his life and his personal finances in the last chapter of the book, so it's good to see that he is practicing what he preaches, and also it's fun to see what somebody else that has reached that level of success is doing with their money. So that's it for the final few chapters. I'm gonna go back to my studio and do a little recap on what I thought about the book as a whole. I'll talk about a couple of problems I saw with it, and then some things I really liked, and I'll rate it from 1 to 10. So here we go. All right. Much better. So for starters, I'll say that as a financial planner, all of the technical information in this book was precise. Sometimes you do read finance books where the information seems partially reported or misleading or a little bit manipulated in order to make the author's views stand out more as correct. And in this book, I never felt like I was being manipulated by the author. It felt like the information was being provided more holistically and to the reader's benefits. So that's a huge plus, both giving credit to the author and also recognizing from a technical standpoint that this is very good information to act on in your personal finances and not have to worry about any kind of negative implications from that. Also, working in the industry, I can say it's very easy to get off on tangents. As financial planners, we want to cover every minute detail and every technical exemption to the things that we're talking about. So Brian does a great job of highlighting the relevant ancillary details without allowing that to derail the narrative that he's speaking. Although if you watch the Money Guy show, you might know that this is probably as much a credit to his editors as it is to Brian himself, but regardless, the book turns out really good in this capacity. Functionally, this book provides a phenomenal resource for people to take actionable steps at improving their finances, and in places where more resources are necessary to flush out that idea more completely, he always refers to some resources that he's made available on his website. Now, having looked through the resources available on the website, there are very solid resources. I like a lot of them, and I think that they will be a great benefit to the people that take the time to take that extra step and look at those resources and utilize them. However, I know for many people, they're not going to take that extra step to go online, so I also really like that he includes a checklist at the end of every chapter and some of those same resources found online available printed out in the book itself. I think that's a great way to do that. All right, so as for my rating of the book, I think this book has the ability to be absolutely life-changing for a generation of financial mutants, as he calls them. I'll say personally, he has shared a story before in his other content, and he shares again in this book, where the happiest time of his life was when his dad was actually laid off and not able to work because he was able to then spend so much time with his dad. And that story had such an impact on me that it actually helped me to decide to leave my job and pursue working for myself as well. So I can absolutely absolutely say the content in this book can fundamentally change your life as it has already changed mine. And this is why I would consider this book to be up there with the giants like The Millionaire Next Door or Your Money or Your Life. Brian is also maybe the most genuinely empathetic and caring person I know that creates content for this industry, and it really shows through his writing. It's a very optimistic read. You can tell he's really pouring his soul out into these pages, and that really helps me to stick with him and to trust that what he's saying is genuinely in my best interest. I am so grateful to him and for his team for making this book possible. That being said, I want to be comprehensive with this review, so I do have a few negatives I do want to touch on. Firstly, I've never loved the first step in the financial order of operations. The first step is to have your highest deductible covered. Your highest deductible being the amount you pay out of pocket before insurance kicks in. There is some logic to structuring the step in this way. I think something they were trying to avoid was mirroring the problem with Dave Ramsey's first step, which is to save $1,000. That $1,000 not having changed since the 90s. Where I think this falls apart is that most people who are seeking a structure for getting on top of their finances, like the financial order of operations, aren't very familiar with the specifics of their financial information and might not be able to access that information very easily. So when I've mentioned this to clients in the past as a potential first step to take, most of them have trouble collecting that information to find out which of their insurance policies carries the highest deductible, so it creates just enough friction there that people might not get started down this path, which is the last thing you want to happen. The other negative I've already mentioned in the past, this book isn't going to be one that I can pass on to my grandchildren and have them follow it to a T like I'm able to follow it to a T. Once again, this isn't a very big deal, and if it wasn't so specific with the strategies that it's recommending, then it wouldn't be able to be as powerful as it is. And the money mindset he espouses in this book is still going to be something that can carry on for generations. Lastly, unfortunately, there is a little bit of a printing issue that I noticed while reading the book. There are some pages where the ink is a little bit more faded or it's just using a lighter shade of printing. I initially thought this might have been an elective choice, but when I looked at it more closely, I noticed that the lighter shades in the printing aren't separated by book section. Instead, it seems to be page to page. This isn't a big deal either, but something I noticed, especially because I was reading the book in 24 hours and was getting pretty tired towards the end, that having that lighter print made it a little bit harder to read. But because the book was so gripping, I didn't have any real problems with this, and it's something that I imagine will be fixed in the future printings. Overall, I give this book a 9 out of 10. Brian and his team should be very proud of the work they did in this book. It's a wonderful book and a great resource. I'll be passing my personal copy on to a few people in my circle that I want to read it, and I'll probably be buying another copy or two to pass on to other people as well. Not to mention all my friends are going to be getting this for their birthday or whatever holidays coming up next. So sorry in advance to my friends, but be looking out for that. If you've made it this far, then please do give Brian some love. If you've already purchased the book, then leave him a review online. If you haven't purchased the book yet, I definitely recommend purchasing the book. It's nice to have the hard copy, and with some of those reference materials where you can actually write directly in the book, I think it's good to have your own personal copy. Also because it's a great reference material that you can look to in the future as you work your way through the financial order of operations. Lastly, if you enjoy personal finance content from a professional, then please do subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. I'm a CFP professional currently following in Brian's footsteps to provide financial resources and education to folks that need it for free. So any of your support, especially through subscribing, is really appreciated. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching to the end, and God bless.